Movies and shows about entrepreneurial teens can be an entertaining watch when it's done correctly. Netflix brings us a comedy series called Fakes that uses a real-life story as the backdrop. But is it any good? Zoe and Becca are two teenage best friends who accidentally build and then lose one of the largest fake ID empires in North America. So like I said, this is based on true events, but I'm sure that many liberties are taken in the retelling of this story. Right from the start, this show gave me similar feels of another based on truth Netflix series, How to Sell Drugs Online Fast. Now in that, the characters break the fourth wall, get into ridiculous and tense situations, and in the midst of it all, are making a crap ton of money. Fakes is pretty much the same, except instead of drugs being sold, it's fake IDs. Zoe and Becca are two high school friends that stumble upon the idea to sell the IDs. And when their operation gets insanely popular and in demand, that's when the pressure mounts and bad things, of course, start to happen. This is told through a she said type of narrative. We'll watch a series of events play out in an episode with one of the two girls basically narrating at key points just to keep us informed. Then when the next episode arrives, we watch the scenario play out again, but now it's from the other girl's perspective. Now, as you can imagine, the points of view are always different, and the one telling the story at any given point is shown to be the more sympathetic character. So you're probably thinking that this type of storytelling presentation sounds repetitive. It is. I mean, at first, I didn't mind the retelling from the other point of view, but it got tiresome pretty quickly. To the show's credit, though, at some points, a character will turn in an aside to us and basically give us a nod or say something to the effect that we get what's going on and then end the repetition for that sequence. Now, I appreciated that, so we didn't have to literally watch every event twice. Still, though, it was a bit much. Both of the main characters, while they can have some quieter and softer moments within the story, the majority of the time, they're very abrasive and extremely hard to connect with. And then there is the screaming. Oh my gosh, good gravy, there is so much yelling and screaming that the two do back and forth at each other. That in itself was almost enough to turn the show off. Now sure, some yelling when something goes wrong or there's a disagreement, it's plausible and even expected, but the amount of it that we get is annoying and it is way too melodramatic. And as the series progresses, that seems to be the main mode of conversation that we get from our characters. Now some of the comedy in this series works, especially when the characters are breaking the fourth wall and having a conversation directly with the audience. The snarky asides are engaging but not overused, which is appreciated. In addition to Becca and Zoe, there is another semi-main character in this named Trist. Now he's a bit of an enigma in how he's presented, especially when we get the opposing viewpoints from the storytelling of the two girls. But Trist at times comes across as a very nice guy, maybe somebody who's struggling a bit and has some issues and flaws, but is still making a go of it, even if most of the things that he does aren't legal. Now there's a point where we get a glimpse into his life outside of dealing with Zoe and Becca, but it's barely explained and without a lot of context. Plus, it's only shown to us once, so the reasoning for the scene is kind of curious. Now I don't really know what to do with the info that we get, other than maybe it's there to allow us to have some kind of understanding or maybe compassion for Trist. But these odd glimpses into relationships aren't solely relegated to Trist. I mean, we get them with both Becca and Zoe also. And while their relationships may go to illustrate their overall unhappiness in life, the focus that these receive is scattered and it's broken, typically only working to pad the episode time instead of really building out a relationship arc that provides any sort of connection. Now this is a 10-episode first season with each of the episodes being about 22 minutes. It's a fast binge, but I found the story, especially with the over-aggressive emotions, not to be an especially easy one. I also think that the 10 episodes are just too many for what the story is telling, and that a lot of the back and forth our characters do, unfortunately, just doesn't progress the narrative forward in an efficient manner. Now, some of the situations are funny, and they're even ridiculous, but the more the show went along, I was just wishing for faster conversations to get to the point more quickly. Now, frustratingly enough, this season ends pretty much mid-action. And like many shows that are retelling a real-life story, this starts out towards the end and then uses the majority of the show to give us all the backstory, all the while bringing us to the point that we first see in the opening sequence. But when we arrive back where we started, the show moves forward into the present just a bit, it then gives us some new details, and then goes to credits. Really, it feels as though this entire first season is prologue, and that season 2 is where the story is actually going to begin. But as we know, especially in streaming services, a second season is never a guarantee, so this cliffhanger ending could be the last that we see of the story. And that would be extremely frustrating, because despite me having issues with some of the presentation, and especially the repetition, I was invested in this, and I want to know how this true story plays out. Sure, I can just Google it, but I'd rather watch the angry melodrama than just read about some news article. Now, some of the cinematography in this was surprisingly great to look at. Now, I say surprisingly because I typically don't expect to see awesome shots from a series, especially one produced in North America. Now, that's not to say I expect crap, I just figure the presentation will be sufficient and look halfway decent. But there are times in this that have a very European feel to the filming. That being said, there is one point where the imagery is somewhat off-putting. They employ this scene overlay that resembles one of those terrible school photos, where the floating head is in the corner with a soft focus around the edges, and then the full torso shot is behind that. And there's a sequence in the show that looked like that, and I didn't find it to be creative or pleasing. So overall, Fakes is an intriguing story with an uncommon storytelling style. The back and forth narratives between characters can be tiring and repetitive, but thankfully the use of sarcasm and fourth wall breakage does help to mitigate the repetition to a degree. The increasingly angry tone of the show did become exhausting, with many moments of screaming that ended up making the experience unenjoyable and certainly unfunny. I think the characters do have some mystery and intrigue to them, and hopefully the second season is going to be ordered to dive more into the characters while also providing some resolution to our story. There's not really any sex, no nudity, a ton of profanity, and some violence. I give season 1 of Fakes 3 out of 5 couches. So are there any shows or movies that are based on true stories that you really enjoy? Let me know about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.